Discussing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 82, Text 45. Let's see if I can bring this up. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Aham hi sarva bhutanam adir anton taran bahi botikanam yata kamvar burvayur jyoti angana. So this is a verse spoken by Krishna to the gopis at Kurukshetra during the time of the solar eclipse, when he is trying to pacify them for the fact that he has been separated from them for a very long time, and that he is not indeed going to go back with them to Vrindavan. Of course, our Rath Yatra festival is a festival of the residents of Vrindavan, gopis, but all the residents of Vrindavan, actually bringing Krishna, Balaram, and Subhadra from Kurukshetra to Vrindavan. But anyway, at this particular point, Krishna is saying, yes, I've been separated with you and I'm not coming back to Vrindavan. And here he's speaking philosophy to explain how especially the gopis, but all the devotees can deal with this situation. So aham, I, he, indeed, sarva, all, bhutanam, of created beings, adi, the beginning, antaha, the end, antaram, inside, bahi, outside, botikanam, of material things, yata, as, come, ether, also that's basically space, vaha, water, buhu, earth, vayu, air, jyotihi, and fire, anganaha, O ladies. Translation by the BBT. Dear ladies, I am the beginning and end of all created beings and exist both within and without them, just as the elements ether, water, earth, air, and fire are the beginning and end of all material objects and exist both within and without them. PBT purport. According to Srila Siddhar Swami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, Lord Krishna implies the following idea in this verse. If you know that I am the Supreme Lord, there should be no question of your suffering any separation from me, since I pervade all existence. Your unhappiness must be due to a lack of discrimination. Therefore, please take this instruction from me, which will remove your ignorance. But the truth of the matter is that you gopis were in your previous lives great masters of yoga, and thus you must already know this science of Jnana Yoga. Furthermore, whether I try to teach this to you in person or through my representatives such as Uddhava, it will not produce the desired result. Jnana Yoga simply causes suffering for those who are fully immersed in pure love of Godhead. So, of course, Jnana is included in love, but to have that as your only position is not going to be pleasurable for those who are in bhakti. Aham hi sarva bhutanam adir anton taram bahi botikanam yata kamvar bhuvayur jyoti anganaha. Dear ladies, I am the beginning and end of all created beings and exist both within and without them, just as the elements ether, water, earth, air, and fire are the beginning and end of all material objects and exists both within and without them. So this verse, it was interesting that I was introduced as someone who discusses hermeneutics, because this verse is very related to hermeneutics. And I would like to put in the chat a very important verse. This is the third verse, the verse I've just put in the chat, 2935, is one of the verses of what's called the Chatur Shloki of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It is one of the 4 verses that was spoken by the Lord to Brahma, and it encapsulates in 4 verses what we would call Siddhanta. You'll notice that this verse 2935 is practically identical in meaning to today's verse. O Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created, and at the same time I am outside of everything. That's Srila Prabhupada's translation. Bhanuswami gives another translation of this verse, which I've also put in the chat. Just as the elements enter into all beings and also remain separate, I enter into all beings and remain separate when I perform my pastimes. In pastimes related to the material world, I remain detached, and in pastimes related to devotees, I am attached. So before we go into the meaning of this verse and how we would apply this verse, I want to discuss this verse in terms of hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the system by which one can understand the meaning and the application of anything in the scripture, anything taught by spiritual masters presently on the earth or one's own spiritual masters, and anything taught by previous great teachers or acharyas. So we take a statement from the scripture, a verse, or we take a statement from a purport or a commentary, and we want to understand, okay, what does this mean? How do I apply it? So there's many steps in hermeneutics, but one of the one we're going to look at today, is where we compare that statement with siddhanta. The word siddhanta, anta means end, conclusion, and siddha means perfection. Now, the word siddhanta, in a very ordinary sense, can mean the conclusion to any kind of a decision. Should we paint the wall? Should we paint the walls blue or green? Okay, let's paint them this shade of blue. That's a conclusion. That's a kind of siddhanta. Huh? So siddhanta can be used in an ordinary sense. What's the ultimate perfect end of this discussion? Siddhanta, in a broader sense, means truth that is universal, eternal, and trans-contextual. So that is truth that universal. It applies to everyone, not only all human beings, but all species, everyone, everything. Eternal, it applies to everyone, everything, always, without beginning and without end. Trans-contextual, it applies regardless of various circumstances. Now, as you can imagine, there aren't very many things that are true for everyone, always, in all circumstances. It's quite a short list. And in practically every system of religion or philosophy, they come up with some list of what you would call siddhanta. So such is the case with all the followers of the Vedas in India. Each school of thought has their own list of siddhanta, of universal, eternal, trans-contextual truths. This is true with other religions in the world. You know, the Muslims have their basic statement of belief. This is what's always true. In Judaism, Maimonides came up with some list. I think it's also 10 or 12 statements of belief. In our particular line, in the Hare Krishna line, there was a statement written by Vyastirtha, a follower of Madhvacharya, 10 statements, which was then slightly reworded by Ballavacharya, who's kind of the link between we Gaudiyas and the Madhvas. And then in the more immediate past, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is the father of the guru of Srila Prabhupada, he kind of amended Baladev Vijayabhushan's list into what's called Das Mula Tattva. Now, you have this list of truths. Another one of these lists is these 4 verses from the Bhagavatam, one of which is practically the same as today's verse. What are things that are true for everyone, always, in all circumstances? So you take another statement from the scripture that you're trying to understand. Let's say you take the statement where Krishna says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, armed with yoga, stand and fight. All right. So if we compare that to a list of universal, eternal, transcontextual truth, we'll find that this statement, armed with yoga, stand and fight, is not true for everyone. Right? I don't know if I've ever stood and fought with somebody. I don't know if I've ever really done that. And it's certainly not something that is applicable to everyone. And it definitely isn't eternal. So, I mean, right now I'm sitting down and I'm not fighting with anybody. It's not that at all times all people are going to be standing and fighting, and certainly not in all circumstances. We might be standing and fighting with some aggressor or in some kind of clay wrestling or something, but it's not the kind of thing we're going to generally do. Therefore, that statement, armed with yoga, stand and fight, is not a statement of Siddhanta. Whereas today's verse, you can see, comparing today's verse to the Chaturshloki verse 35, 2935, you can say it's saying practically the same thing. The language is a little different, but it's making exactly the same point. Exactly. There's no different in the point that's being made. So then you can say, okay, this is a statement that applies to everybody in all places and all times. It's not just something that Krishna was saying to the gopis. And even the statement in the purport that just Gyan Yoga is painful to the Bhakti yogis doesn't mean that Gyan Yoga is not applicable. It just simply means that the Bhakti yogis go beyond Gyan Yoga. They have a deeper understanding. This is one statement of Siddhanta. It's not the complete Siddhanta. And that's another thing to understand. Although what we're seeing is Siddhanta, it's universal, eternal, and transcontextual. In and of itself, it's not complete. You have to look at the complete Siddhanta. The next kind of statements are statements that are contextually applied Siddhanta. For example, if we say, okay, chant the mantra like we chant the beginning of Bhagavatam class, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So chanting some names of the Lord is an eternal and universal truth. But what specific names and what specific mantras are going to be different in different circumstances? So we have, right, Dhruva Maharaj was just chanting this mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, whereas the main mantra we're chanting is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Or many of us chant the Gayatri mantras, but we're not chanting those all day. We chant those at the sandhyas, at sunrise and noon and at sunset, and you only chant those if you've been initiated into them by a guru. So there's a universal eternal principle, Siddhanta, that one should chant the name of God, but exactly what name and how is a contextualization. So when there is a verse that says one should chant this particular mantra, that's a contextualized Siddhanta. Then the third category is something that supports Siddhanta. So a statement in the scripture like armed with yoga, stand and fight, that is not universal, eternal, or transcontextual, but it supports universal, eternal, transcontextual truth. There's kind of a universal, eternal, transcontextual truth hiding under that statement. So that we should be full of yoga in terms of connection with the divine, and that we should do our particular duty, our particular work, according to our particular nature, in the service of the divine. That's a universal, eternal, transcontextual truth that is being supported by the statement to Arjuna of armed with yoga, stand and fight. Even Arjuna isn't supposed to stand and fight all the time. Then you may be surprised, but there are also some statements in the scriptures and by our teachers that oppose Siddhanta. Of course, in the long run, they're supporting Siddhanta, but that statement just taken in isolation as it is opposed to Siddhanta. The easiest to understand example of this sort of statement are the statements made by demoniac evil persons that are included in the scriptures as part of a narrative. For example, when Krishna is in Mathura, when he goes to Vrindavan to finally kill Kamsa, the very evil king who's been harassing and torturing the citizens and so forth. So Kamsa engages Krishna in a wrestling match, and after Krishna and Balaram defeat the wrestlers, Kamsa becomes very afraid for his life. And he makes a statement in the Bhagavatam that says, immediately capture Krishna and Balaram, throw them out of the city, and take all of their wealth. So just like we have in Vrindavan deities of Krishna and Balaram on the altar, and we don't take this statement by Kamsa in the Bhagavatam as anything that we're supposed to do. We don't say, well, let's take all of the paraphernalia from the deities and throw them off the altar because there's this statement, take all the wealth of Krishna and Balaram and throw them out of the city. So that statement is opposed to Siddhanta. Interestingly enough, in some of these cases, our acharyas, our great previous teachers, will reinterpret these statements using rules of Sanskrit grammar to mean something else. So these are 4 comparisons that we make. We take a statement, and we're looking at a verse, or we're looking at a statement from Guru or acharyas, and the first thing that we do, actually, first thing we do is we look at our own state of consciousness and our own qualification. But the first thing we do in terms of understanding the verse is we say, is it a restatement of Siddhanta? Which means we have to know Siddhanta. Is it a contextualization of Siddhanta? Is it supporting Siddhanta? Or is it opposing Siddhanta? This analysis is extremely important. You don't want to take a contextualization of Siddhanta and say it's transcontextual, and you don't want to take something that's supporting Siddhanta and say it's Siddhanta. You certainly don't want to take something that's opposing Siddhanta and say it's Siddhanta. Most of the difficulties people have with understanding and application of the words of Shastra and our acharyas is mistaking a statement that supports Siddhanta for Siddhanta. So practically all of the statements about social structure and social dealings are in that category. There's other tools then, there's other principles and tools, hermeneutics principles and tools to understand that we go beyond. I haven't given you, we teach hermeneutics in 8 classes of 1.5 to 2 hours each. So can't go into depth on that, but just to give you some idea, because when I saw this verse, I'm given a calendar with dates and verses, and I saw this verse and I'm like, oh, wow, I really want to talk about this particular verse. All right. So I think in talking about this verse, it's a good idea to actually go back to 2.9.35 itself. And because that's something where we have copious commentary from Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas. This verse is also quoted in the Adi Leela by Krishnadas Kaviraj, and Srila Prabhupada has extensive commentary there as well. So our main difficulties that we can get some guidance on from this verse is that we struggle with our attachments in this world. And it seems like we're always struggling with illusion and our attachments. And we might think, well, first I have to become detached and then I can find Krishna. Or we just feel that Krishna is absent from our life. This was the immediate problem of the gopis. Of course, in a very literal sense, Krishna was in a geographically distant location in terms of, what was appeared there, that we feel entangled in illusion and we feel separate from Krishna. But here Krishna is telling us that above material detachment is spiritual attachment, and that Krishna is always present with us. That Krishna is always present with us. And if we can understand how Krishna is always present with us, then we will be able to see the material, so-called material energy as spiritual. So the basic themes here is that the Lord is immanent and also transcendent. These words, immanent and transcendent, are used in Christianity and to some extent in Judaism and Islam to understand that the Lord is all-pervading, and at the same time, he exists as a separate person. Most religions tend to focus on one or the other. Either God is everywhere and in everything, or God is separate as a supreme being. I know the Muslims concentrate on God as transcendent, and they say that God is so transcendent that he cannot incarnate here, that he's of such a different nature from the world. You know, God and the world are two totally separate things. And then you have other spiritual philosophies that, well, God is everywhere, he's in everything, and there's no separate existence of God. So this verse instructs us, this is a summary that Prabhupada gives in Adi 156, the other place where this verse is stated. Prabhupada says this verse instructs us that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable energies, is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities and the material energy. This knowledge is called Achinta Beta Beta Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural, transcendental love for him. The surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. So this statement, Achinta Beta Beta Tattva, is one, remember I said that there's this list from Vyastirtha, amended somewhat by Baladev Vidyabhushan, amended somewhat by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. One of the items is Achinta Beta Beta Tattva, that everything is inconceivably, fully the same as Krishna and different from Krishna. Right? So the point is that the Lord is in every atom of this world and also separately in the spiritual world. And this particular understanding in the 9th chapter was given to Brahma because Brahma said, how do you perform material and spiritual pastimes? And the Lord said, well, I'm going to tell you a secret called Rahasyam. Rahasyam means a great secret. So I'm going to tell you a great secret. This word Rahasyam is also used in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna tells Arjuna, because you're my devotee and my friend, I'm telling you this great secret. So the secret is that Krishna is everywhere in everything. And impersonalists can maybe imagine that, but the devotees actually experience that. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena, santas sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti, yam shaima sundaram achincha gunasaruham. The devotees, when they have love, they see Krishna everywhere. This is a mystery. How can God be everywhere? But when you love him, you see that he's everywhere. And the way the Lord deals with his devotees, like here how he's dealing with the gopis, are also a mystery. That the pastimes of the Lord are televised into the heart of a devotee. We have in today's verse, within and without, reminded me of the George Harrison song called Within You, Without You. The Lord is inside and outside. The pastimes are televised into the heart of a devotee. The desires of a devotee are all fulfilled. And although the Lord is in the heart of the devotee, still the Lord is also outside to be perceived by them. And of course, that's the complaint of the gopis, is they say, we don't see you outside to be perceived by us. And Krishna's saying, but I'm everywhere. And then in the commentary is, well, that's not going to be enough for the gopis. They also want him outside to be perceived by their senses. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur comments on tune 935, a very wonderful purport. And I'd like to just read some of this to you. He says, the entrance of the elements into the living beings is without attachment. So this is the list that Krishna gave: space, water, air, fire, earth, right? Or whatever our body's made of. Our bodies are made of, there's space, there's liquid, there's heat, right? There's solids like bones and muscles, right? So there's all of these elements that have entered into us. Space, matter in a gaseous form, radiant energy, matter in liquid form, and matter in solid form. So again, the entrance of the elements, according to Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, into the living beings is without attachment, since the elements are not conscious. Like the ether, though I am conscious, like the man who lives in his house without attachment, I remain without attachment while entering, regulating, and protecting all beings. My pastimes are without attachment in relation to the elements and the living beings within the material world. So this commentary is saying that just like, although there's air in my body, that air doesn't have any attachment because it's a material element. So when Krishna is creating the world, maintaining the world, dissolving the world, he's doing it from a position of neutrality. Right? He's just reciprocating. People are getting their karma, everything's in balance. And Krishna's like this neutral, disinterested, not uninterested, but disinterested judge. All right, going on with this purport. But I desire to show myself to my obedient devotees who've entered my heart, who have perfected themselves and bow to me, remaining separate, not entering their hearts. I desire to offer my beauty to their eyes. I desire that my fragrance enter their nostrils, and desire to fill their ears with the nectar of my sweet voice, speaking with them and answering them. I desire to make their limbs experience the sweet softness of my body by touching and embracing them. Thus situated inside my devotees and externally as well, I perform pastimes with great attachment for my pure devotees who are beyond the gunas, that's the modes of nature, whom I cannot give up. By the way, another verse that is almost identical to this verse was also spoken by Krishna to the gopis, in this case, again, when they were separated from him, in this case, in a letter delivered by Uddhava, that was in 10:47:29, where Krishna says, my dear gopis, and I'll put this in the chat so that you will have this as well for your reference. It says, my dear gopis, just as the five material elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether are all pervading in this material world and present in the bodies of all living entities, in the same way I am always present within you. I reside in your minds, senses, and your life breath, for I have taken shelter in all these places. Now, again, this is called a rahasyam, a mystery. When in Srila Prabhupada's purport to 2935, he uses the word mystery 13 times, and he uses the word mysterious 3 times. In his purport to CC Adi 155, which is the same verse, he uses the word mysteries 1 time. So altogether, 17 times. Now, this word mystery is from 2:9:31, where Krishna tells Brahma that he's going to speak some mysteries. And again, I also referred you to Bhagavad Gita 4:3, where Krishna tells Arjuna he will reveal these mysteries. Okay, how are we going to enter into this mystery? How are we going to actually experience that the Lord is present in everything and yet also with us as a person? So some of you know that I worked with a co-author, Kamlasita, to write the book Krishna Meditations. And there we go through all the ways, well, not all the ways, but a lot of the ways in which we can find Krishna in the world. Right? The Bhagavatam also explains how the air is his breath. When we're breathing, we can understand, I'm breathing in the breath of God. The air that is within me is actually the prana of the Lord. When we see the sun and the moon, we can see these are the eyes of the Lord looking on me with love. In the Bhagavad Gita, we have verses like, I am the taste of water. When we're drinking water or any liquid, That is the taste of God. The light of the sun. That Krishna is the light of the sun. He is the heat in fire. Right now, where I am, it is extremely cold. And we have the central heat on, but it's so cold that I also have another heater here in my room. And when I'm outside in the cold, it hardly ever gets this cold. This is very unusual weather for us here. I'm outside in the cold, and even wearing a lot of clothes outside, I still feel the cold. And when I go into the room, I'm like, Krishna is the heat in fire. Krishna says he is the resting place. When we sit on our chair, we lie in our bed. Krishna is the resting place. Krishna is the abode. When we open the door to our room, Krishna is the abode. The birds show his artistry. We see the beauty of the birds, the flight of the birds. We realize his artistry, that we become aware of how Krishna is present. The trees are his hairs. We start to become aware of how Krishna is everywhere. Then we don't feel separate from him. We feel that we're always with him. And he's also there, present, outside of us. Of course, we have the deity of Krishna that we worship with love. We have so many pictures. I have so many nice pictures by Krishna's mercy. But also, Krishna is a person that we can talk to. We can have an exchange with. We can feel when we chant his name. Prabhupada says when we chant his name, we should feel his personal presence in our lives. And Prabhupada comments in Krishna book that these instructions that Krishna gave to the gopis at Kurukshetra are relevant for all devotees. This particular statement is a universal, eternal, transcontextual truth. That Krishna is within us and he's outside of us. This is the prayer we sing about Lord Nrsingadev every day in our temples. Bahir Nisingo Hridaye Nishingo. You are outside Bahir, Hridaye, you're in my heart. And in that way, we are always feeling that we are in the presence of the Lord. And that way we feel we have an object for our love. We feel the Lord's comfort. We feel the Lord's grace. We know that there's always meaning and purpose, even to the very difficult and confusing things that happen in our life. And we have a practical way of offering everything in service, because the Lord is within everything, and yet he is outside of everything. So because he's within everything, he can accept it. And because he's outside of everything, I can offer everything to him. So I wanted to take some time for questions. I had just a personal statement about how to find your dharma to stand and fight. So we have our book, Career Dharma, where we go through how do you find what is your own dharma. And very, very soon, we will be releasing an online course on Career Dharma.
Thank you very much.
So we have a question in the chat. By beginning and end of all created beings in this verse, is Krishna referring to our material bodies? Yes. Yes, and to the material world. Krishna says that he is the beginning, middle, and end of everything. So the beginning of our bodies, the youthfulness of our bodies, the end of our bodies, and all of that is all Krishna. Yes, Gail.
Hare Krishna, Mother Urmila. I think you said that one of the things that we tend to confuse most often is Siddhanta with those statements that are only meant to support Siddhanta. And so I was wondering if you haven't already, could you give an example of such an instance?
Something that supports Siddhanta is something like armed with yoga, stand and fight. The Siddhanta it's supporting is that we should have connection with the Lord and do our particular duties according to the time in connection with the Lord. But the statement in and of itself are not like that. Is there a list of verses? This is also a personal thing that are eternal transcendental truth. That's these 4 verses. The Chatur Sloki is like that. And No, I haven't gone through the scriptures and compiled a list of all the verses that are a restatement of Siddhanta. That would be a lot of work. If you want to get also a clear list of Siddhanta, you can look at Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Das Mula Tattva. And if you look in our hermeneutics materials, we also take Prabhupada's purport to the last verse of the Chaturshloki in the Adi Lila, and we pull out pretty much the same list from there. Gail, does that answer your question, or did you want something more?
No, it was. I was more looking for those, not the Siddhanta, but those that support the Siddhanta. I mean, you just mentioned stand and fight, but that's only supportive because that's only applicable to those people whose dharma it is to like fight, I guess.
And it's only applicable at the time when they're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Right.
soldiers aren't fighting 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they may not even always be standing when they're fighting. Maybe sometimes they're sitting in a tank or on a horse or something. So, it's only applicable to some people in some circumstances, but there's an eternal principle under it that everyone should be doing their duty connected with the Lord. But that's not what the statement says. That's what the statement points to, but it's not what it says.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Or if you take, like Prabhupada's statements about women should be protected.
Mm-hmm.
Or, another statement is the one statement Prabhupada says every woman should be married. Okay, so that doesn't apply to actually everyone.
How about the protection one? That's trans-contextual, right?
No, it isn't. But let's say every woman should be married. I mean, should a 90-year-old widow be married? No, of course not. A woman who's actually qualified to be a renunciate, and there have been many throughout history, they're in the minority. All people qualified to be lifetime renunciates, male and female, are in the minority, but they exist. And they actually shouldn't be married.
So they don't need to be protected, you're saying?
Well, let's look at one statement at a time. So that statement, all women should be married, is not universal, it's not eternal, and it's not transcontextual. It's not any of those things. But it's pointing to something. It's pointing to the idea that, there's a system of ashram, and that system of ashram, which is also not universal, eternal, and transcontextual, is facilitating a peaceful life where you can surrender to Krishna. Just like Krishna says, how can there be any happiness without peace? It's pointing to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's supporting that. Women should be protected is a very similar thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pingala in her prayers in the 11th canto says when one is fully Krishna conscious, they become their own protector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, you could say it's a general truth in society that females need special protection because most females are physiologically more vulnerable, that males are generally physically stronger, and certainly women are more sexually vulnerable than men are. You can say men can be raped, yes, but men are generally raped by other men. There's technically a woman could rape a man in terms of if a 30-year-old woman has sex with a 12-year-old boy, that's statutory rape, but women obviously cannot rape. So women are more vulnerable than men sexually and physiologically, and therefore women need to be protected, ironically, from men. So women need men to protect them from men. So, but is that always true for all women at all times and all places? No, obviously not.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an eternal, universal, transcontextual truth. I mean, Durga Devi doesn't need anyone to protect her, I'll tell you that. So, it's pointing to something. It's pointing to the idea that anyone who's in a more vulnerable position for whatever reason should be taken care of by those who are stronger. That's a general truth. Children should be protected by adults, and part of the protection you're giving children is from bad adults. So the good adults should protect the kids from bad adults. People who have more money should give protection to people who have less money. People who have more power should give protection to those who have less power. So that's a general, that even is also supporting Siddhanta. That in itself is not eternal, universal, transcontextual truth. But it's supporting a Siddhanta that all living entities are part of the Lord. Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Bhakti Center.
Hare Krishna, Mother
Hare
Urmila.
Krishna.
Good to see you.
Always good to see you.
Thank you. We're also very excited for the prospect of your joining us again in New York, perhaps in a few months, to represent a second part to your career Dharma. We're very excited by that. My question, in the mood of Arjuna, when he asks in the Bhagavad Gita, how does one sit and how does one walk and how does he speak? In that mood, how do we cultivate that awareness of Krishna's constant presence without and within? You know, we're doing so many sadhana practices to cultivate that, but to be honest, like, at least for myself, sometimes, although I'm doing those practices, I'm not fully conscious of that reality. But when you spoke, it was very present.
Right. Well, it's therefore we have something called sadhana. So really, really which is also called abhyas yoga, which means to repeat. So, in education, there's 4 levels of learning. One is unconscious incompetence, then the next is conscious incompetence, the next is conscious competence, and the next is unconscious competence. So materialistic people are going around without seeing God everywhere, and they don't even know they're not seeing God everywhere. They have no idea. It's just like if there was gold around them everywhere and they didn't even know it was gold. So they're just like, did you see any gold? No, I didn't see any gold. They don't even know they're not seeing it. Then you have the awareness, what you're talking about. Oh man, I went for the whole day without seeing how Krishna is within and without. Oh, wow, that was awful. Or the last hour, I just didn't have any awareness. That's conscious incompetence.
Is it where Manohar is at? Is that
Huh?
Manohar's level?
Bad.
I want the first one to
Very
do
bad. So, so that's a painful place to be,
it.
where you're doing it wrong and you become aware you're doing it wrong, but you don't know how to do it right yet. But it's a good first step. It's a good first step because we first have to be aware of the fact that we're doing it wrong before we can fix it. Oh boy, for the last hour, I wasn't aware. I just drank water and I just drank it unconsciously. Oops. I wasn't conscious. Then there's conscious competence. That's what sadhana means. Sadhana means conscious competence. Abhyas yoga. I'm going to practice. And you say, okay, you can pick one of them. Today I'm going to practice seeing Krishna in the light of the sun. Today I'm going to practice seeing Krishna in the heat and fire. Today I'm going to practice seeing Krishna as my abode. Today I'm going to practice Krishna as a taste of water. Even then, my dear friends, you may only end up doing it 3 times a day because you may forget the rest of the time. So like you wake up in the morning, what thing am I going to choose today? I'm going to choose Krishna as a taste and water. Oh, okay, I'm coming a minute. All right, and you forgot. But at least if sometimes, and then you celebrate the wins, oh, at least one time. Now I remembered. Yes. And if you celebrate the wins, you're much more likely to keep going. And pretty soon it becomes automatic. How can we see Krishna outside? This is primarily through deity worship and through scripture and through the chanting of the holy name. That is where particularly we're dealing with Krishna as a person. So by regular deity worship, by regular hearing of these pastimes in the scriptures, and by regularly chanting the holy name with feeling that Krishna is present in his holy name, if we keep practicing that, even if again, even if again, maybe today I went to see the deities and like, yeah, hi, there are the deities. And other times I really, wow, Krishna's really present here. Let me meditate on how Krishna's present there and celebrate the wins. So it is 8:01, and I think we have to stop to greet the deities. And I hope you don't mind if I run away quickly because I'm part of an international interfaith conference. They changed the dates to today. And it's already started without me, and I'm supposed to join that. So I need to go right away to
Thank you,
attend.
Urmila, Devi, Dasi, Prabhu. Thank you. Wonderful, thought-provoking class. Thank you. Shastrik, perfect, funny, relatable. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything wonderful in this class is from Prabhupada and Sukadeva Goswami and our acharyas like Srila Vishwanath Thakur, and definitely not from me. Any good or bad in this class was mine, and I hope you will excuse that. Thank you. Hare Krishna.